Welcome to the YouTube pre-stream. The actual show is expected to begin in about 2 minutes or so. So please hang tight. Let's get this widescreen business going here. Hello, and welcome to a Saturday, not Saturday, Sunday afternoon / evening show, depending on where you are in the world, on the world, not in the world, on the world. It is PMPVsImpromptu3, because for a while there wasn't a lot of certainty about the show, but then things became a bit more certain, so welcome along. I will be your host for the next 2 hours or so, and there is a YouTube stream you can jump on if you're so inclined to view some very, very basic, boring visuals, as well as an IRC chat channel. And an old friend of mine in a recent YouTube video stream commented saying, "Oh, you talk about the chat a lot. Maybe you should post something in the description." And that's true. If that were an automated thing, it would happen all the time. But currently, it's a time away from other things that are just simply more pressing. But I do my best to announce it every show, and this show is no exception. So, if you do want to join us, that is to say, Shargo, Immortal, Local Hoster, and Commodore Oldfort, who is just joining us now on the chat, you can do so by jumping on the EF network on the internet relay chat with your preferred client and, have a bit of a chinwag. And because this is an impromptu show, there is zero script available for me. Any story I will come up with, any anecdote, literally will be just off the top of my head. Hence, maybe thought about relying a little bit on you, listeners. If you have any, why don't we make it a advice show? If anyone has any quandaries or problems they would like a bit of input on, I would be more than happy to lend some advice. But then again, so my own personal experience with advice and things like that is always that at the end of the day, you're kind of relying on yourself. Getting advice and getting input from many perspectives is always helpful, and I would advise anyone to do that regardless of what problem they're facing, provided that it's, a tricky one, or, not a mundane one, such as should I take the car or the bike today? But at the end of the day, still, it is your own decision, and sometimes people don't give great advice. There's also a lot of bad advice givers out there, so let's not dwell too much on that. Before we jump into the first request of the evening, and the bed should die just about now. Yep, there goes the bed. Local hoster was, no. Actually, I'm starting off on the wrong foot here. Shargo was in way before, or a couple of minutes before, with the request that he had picked out. And let's see, he wanted a little bit of, both Chris Holm with Vendetta, as well as Ray Diaz with The Great Giant Sisters Deep Tunnel remix. Well, I'm keen to hear the Vendetta version, because I haven't heard that before. So why don't we take a listen to Chris Holm's rendition of Vendetta to kick off the show. Please enjoy. What a somber tune. That was Chris Holm with Vendetta, requested by none other than Shargo, if I'm not mistaken. I need to click around here a bit. Yes, Shargo indeed. So thank you very much for requesting that, Shargo. I like it. A pretty, somewhat dark, moody tune, but definitely something nice to start the show off with. Let's very quickly go through a few bits of PlanMixPlay news that I've been fiddling about with here, because as recently as last show, about a week ago, if you recall, we spoke a little bit about the fact that there needs to be some sort of order to visuals now that the instrument is beginning to grow a little bit more complex in terms of the visual output. I know it's been the same thing for the past, I think, 2 months now. But so many of the pieces are in place to move forward. But there's always just one or two things more that needs to be done in order for have everything run exactly the way I want it to. And I've kind of made up my mind here that I don't want to rush this part of it. I'd rather take another 2 months just to perfect this particular aspect and have it work the way I want to. Just because it'll be that much more interesting when it starts working. And probably also because I know once I push a new version through, I tend to stick with it for a long time, because once something has finally been proven to work predictably, I'm very hesitant to shove it aside, just simply because I've tried having at least one show where things went a little awry, something crashed. It's never fun having a piece of software in use where you're never quite sure if, the next move you make will cause it to collapse. And something I looked at recently, which may or may not interest people who do C64 stuff, is because I'm sort of simulating the output of a C64, I had a closer look at the resolution capabilities, and it's interesting because the Commodore 64, if you recall, has this very iconic bluish kind of, Commodore stuff, a typical input command console, and it has a dark blue center and a bright blue border. And I remember playing the games on my computer or on the C64 back in the day, and I remember the border kind of never ever being used for anything as a border. And but then again, some games seemed to do it and some didn't. And if you look up what sort of resolution modes are supported by the C64, you would be surprised what you find. In fact, some modes weren't really created until, we're talking within the past decade, even though the machine is, well and truly about 30, 40 years old now. And that's fascinating, because it just goes to show that the way the hardware was put together is in no means or way the last way the hardware is used. People continuously find new ways of kind of breaking the hardware or using it in a new manner, which is, if I had more time, I'd be very excited and looking into that. But what I was really curious about personally at the end of the day is, what is the maximum? What is, if you take the border and everything inclusive, what's the maximum resolution output that the Commodore C64 can muster? Because that is a hard number. There, at some point, the visuals are translated from data into some sort of digital image and sent across, I would call a composite cable back in the day. And I needed to know this maximum resolution, and it's surprising how difficult that was to find. In fact, I'm wondering. I'm on the Wikipedia page, and even the Wikipedia page does not show the number I've ended up coming up with. If you look up C64, you will find the resolution, which is essentially the central typical area that was always rendered into, which is 320 by 200. And I'm sure there are modes that do go beyond this, but this is on some sort of general area how high the resolution was. But if you want the border as well, and I found this instead on a blog post from 2011, someone wrote and basically confirmed, and this seems to kind of match what all the emulators are doing as well. is that it has a maximum capability of 384 times 272. And this was the number I was interested in, because with this number at hand, I can now kind of figure out, well, how, if I need to scale something, how do I need to scale it? What is this maximum output? And this is something I've been fiddling with a bit today and trying to figure out what sort of aspect modes or aspect ratios I have to be concerned about, especially because a modern format is now 16 by 9. And this, if you take the number I just quoted you, the 384 by 272, that's something like 25 by 21. Like, it's a horrible aspect ratio. Not surprisingly, because this pixel perfectness wasn't really a thing back in the day. But because I'm willing to compromise the integrity and the precision of actual C64 simulation with an output that more properly matches what I would say is a normal output format, I will of course be looking at doing 16 by 9 visuals. So again, the question then comes in, well, what do you do with that? How does this resolution scale? Generally, the way to approach this is to keep the height static and to just widen the width until you get to a aspect ratio that fits 16 by 9, which I do have. And I have the numbers for that somewhere too, but that's in a window I closed long ago, and I don't want to bore you anymore with these numbers. But basically, that's what I've been looking into, and hopefully sooner rather than later, there will be some actual worthwhile stuff to look at on the YouTube stream. But that being said, let's take another track, this time by a local hoster who went to the trouble of, I believe, maybe even encoding this particular tune, which then makes me a little wary of some sort of content match on YouTube. But as long as it's just a content match and not a copyright strike, then no big deal. So hopefully this doesn't get matched, and if it does, it'll be removed posthumously. But for now, coming up next, we have Hoffman and Wobble Logi Coma with Engage. Let's take a listen. And there we had Hoffman and Wobble Logicoma engage requested by local hoster. So thank you bunches for requesting that. And oh man, I don't know why, but I'm compelled to say this, and I'm going to say it. Do you know what else comes in bunches? Bananas, and by that standard, well, bananas are eaten by monkeys. And Kioana has requested a Baz Monkeys remix. And yes, that was an incredibly lame segue from one song to another. But come on, work with me here. No one has been providing me with any big mysteries to solve or any life-changing decisions to make. And then, kind of left to my own devices here. And what terrible devices they are, if you ask me. But you get what you pay for, and since this show is free, you hopefully you can kind of see where I'm going with this. Anyway, so yeah, a little bit of a resolution talk, and what was it? Yeah, as I was mentioning before, the resolution is a bit of an awkward one, but most of the rendering for the C64 is done in the small dark blue square, which is 320 by 200. And I'm actually kind of pleased that I looked more into this resolution business, because as you can see on YouTube, if you are watching the YouTube stream, you can see there is already a somewhat facsimile of the input, the command console. But it's not even the 4x3 version, or the 21 by 25 or something, whatever that horrible pixel exact output is. Even that one isn't accurate because I went by some other information I'd found on the internet and just thought, this is good enough now. But now that I'm going to be putting more visuals through, I thought we might as well revisit this and make sure that everything is exactly the way I need it to be. And and also, see, the funny part about all of this is Commodore Oldfart mentioned that on a typical CRT, the top and bottom lines, same for the left and right edges, usually aren't showing. And he's absolutely right. Look, cathode ray tube televisions were, well, maybe not notorious, but that's just part of the design. There's a lot of junk missing on the left side and on the right side and on the top and on the bottom. And that also kind of meant that you were kind of none the wiser that there was a significant difference between the PAL format that we had in Europe and the NTSC format that existed in America. The NTSC format was, I'm going to look this up because I'm sure someone will correct me if I'm wrong, but if I'm not mistaken, I believe the NTSC format was in 60 frames per second, but a lower resolution, and the PAL one ran with 50 frames per second, but a higher resolution. And I'm going to look that up because I'd rather not spread misinformation. Yes, indeed. PAL is 50 frame, 25 doubled up, and had a 625 line configuration, I suppose. And NTSC was somewhat different. And that, of course, also meant that if you popped in a VHS tape that was recorded for NTSC, you could see the image of the movie or whatever was recorded. Like it was. You could see there was something in that noise and garbage, but running a video stream in a different resolution than it was intended and at a different frame rate kind of really messes everything up. But it was fascinating to watch. I recall trying to put an NTSC VHS tape in a PAL player and with a PAL TV, and it just looked fucking crazy. So here you go, a little bit of some tech trivia there. And yes, Commodore Oldfart has the exact format specs in the chat if you're so interested. Anyway, let's take the request by Kioana, who wanted some Defunk with 3 Minute Wonder Bass Monkeys Minimal Electronic Mix.
The bass monk, 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 bass monk. Observe the bass monkey. These highly evolved creatures are members of the New World primates. They are known to be the most intelligent animal ever studied. They have very sensitive hearing and interesting mating habits. At 60 Hz, at about 130 beats per minute, bass monkeys are known to start dancing like they were drugged. We have found that prolonged exposure of these frequencies to bass monkeys have caused them to enter an almost ravenous state. Let me demonstrate for you. Further field studies have provided fascinating results. Fixating shiny lights. The bass mon. We have concluded that their behavior must be due to one thing, and one thing only. It must be the music. Bass monkeys, like they were drugged. Then they must, like crazed animals. Bass monkeys, like they were drugged. Then they must, like crazed animals. Bass monkeys.
3-minute wonder, Baz Monkeys Minimal Electronic by Da Funk. Requested by Kiwana, so thank you very much for requesting that. And apparently the Requestatron Nader thingamajigger might not be responding, although Immortal now claims that it does, which of course throws some weird light on Kiwana and this person's claims. But of course, here at Slay Radio, we operate with guilty until proven. No. Innocent until proving it. That's right, innocent until proven guilty. So, hey, and also, who gives a shit? Like, the fact that the request shows up twice is no skin off my back. But yes, you are banned from ever requesting again. Obviously, that's just, that's kind of implied in any situation. Anyone who requests more than once is immediately banned from requesting ever again. But that's how we work here. We're like the Russian police, stern but fair. And in case it's not obvious, I am joking, of course, Kiwana. You request as much as you like. Don't spam, of course, but hey, you request away. Anyone and everyone is welcome. I'm joking. It is a joke. Alert, funny stuff happening on Slay Radio. And I should have some sort of alarm bell, like, haha, funny joke. See, this is where I need that canned laughter that Boz has in his right pocket. That I feel like cracking a joke that it's surprising there's anything left in that laugh button, the number of times it's been used. But look, I'll level with you and with Boz in case he's listening in. I would fucking spam that mofo as much as well. I would click that laugh button every chance I got. So there. But this isn't Boz's show. This isn't Boz and Kate and all that. And and let's not forget Kate Bitt. Of course, she's also doing a bang-up job, having listened to the recent shows. I'm going to play a song that I found, I think about 5-6 shows ago, which is Gibbs's rendition of Vixen, called Through Corinne's Eyes, because I really like this theme song from the game Vixen. Game was kind of shit, but the music was awesome, and this is Gibbs's rendition of said song. Gibbs with Vixen Through Corinne's Eyes, and if anyone does not like that tune, I will have to ask them to formally submit a signed statement confirming that, because I refuse to believe it. That song is just batshit ass good. Like, Gibbs did such a great number with that song. It's a little repetitive, I will agree. It doesn't, it kind of doesn't evolve a lot from where it starts, but it's also not particularly long. Coming in at just, what do we have here? about 3 minutes and 40 seconds, something around that, according to what I can kind of see on my timeline here. And it's just fucking balls to the wall awesome. I think it's really, really good. So yeah, it's fantastic. I really like it. So thank you to me for requesting that. All right, coming up next, Immortal has requested my favorite DHS track, and it is with a little hesitation that I choose one, not because I don't like DHS, but because I'm just not convinced if this is the one I would single out, because I actually think DHS does a terrific job and has several great tracks. But I think I'm gonna have to pick Blowing, the Serious Uns edit. So one, because we haven't had any uns on the show, and two, because it's in the mixable folder that I have here, which back when I used CDJs to do the show was a folder I would make heavy use on whenever I wanted to at least mix one song together with another. And I really like songs that just have kind of a continuous beat going all the way through. That's just awesome stuff. So that will be my favorite pick. There was something else that I wanted to draw attention to, not having a script. Let's see if I can find it. Yes, there's an article in the New York Times called "Don't Let Facebook Make You Miserable." And you know what? Why don't we just? This error here. Why don't we just postpone? Because the DHS Blowing Searson's edit is a pretty long song. It's about. Let's see, how long is it? 2, 4. It's about 6 minutes. So I thought I'd pull attention to this article. So I'm sure if you Google "Don't Let Facebook Make You Miserable" and New York Times, you can find the exact one that I'm talking about. I would highly recommend reading it. It's very good. Not so much because it says something that we aren't all aware of, but it underpins it with some really concrete, tangible evidence and just tangible information. So the gist of the story, the TLDR, is basically that people represent themselves on Facebook in their best ways, and be careful about hanging out on Facebook, because if you do that a little too much and you have concerns about your life, well, everyone else's life will seem much better by comparison, because they will rarely share when things are shitty. Now, this isn't entirely true. Some people do. Like, some of the comments on this article I remember reading, that someone said, no, I have a friend who basically chronicles the step and piecemeal their ups and downs with some condition. And yeah, that's, that I think that's really healthy as well, because it's an unfortunate fact that things are sometimes shitty. But that's the world we live in, and things don't get better. In fact, they almost always get worse if you ignore the shitty things in our world, because then you are actively avoiding fixing them or doing something about them. And something that this article highlights, which I like, which I think is a good case, is it says here, and I quote from the article, "The Las Vegas budget hotel, Circus, and the luxurious hotel Bellagio each holds about the same number of people. But the Bellagio gets about 3 times as many check-ins on Facebook. Surprise, surprise, people who are spending a lot of money or living in luxury are far more likely to tweet about it. So, if you happen to save up your precious coins and go to this, very, very nice hotel, you'll wanna tell people about it. Whereas if you don't go to a nice hotel, if you deem it to be less worthy of, I guess, the luxurious state you want to be in, well, then you don't tweet about it. And I know it seems to make sense, but at the same time, it's also kind of ridiculous. Like, why would you only tweet if there's something luxurious about where you're staying? Why not just, I'm out at a hotel and this is what I'm doing? But again, it shows that people kind of want to improve their lives, even if it's just, surface-wise to anyone else. And here's another last quote before we get into DHS's song. I really particularly like this one, where it says, sometimes, the article talks a bit about how different data is on Facebook and on Google. And it continues to say, sometimes the contrasts in different data sources are amusing. Consider how wives speak about their husbands. And I quote further, on social media, the top descriptors to complete the phrase, my husband is, are the best, my best friend, amazing, the greatest, and so cute. On Google, one of the top 5 ways to complete that phrase is also amazing. So that checks out. The other 4, a jerk, annoying, gay, and mean. And again, this for me is such a very simple yet so telling piece of evidence about both Facebook and Google have an enormous amount of data. They have a veritable smorgasbord of data to revel in. It is like, I'm sure one has more data than the other, but that doesn't matter. They're both beyond what you can consider necessary in order to at least make some sort of generic assessment of its validity, even when applied to, I'd say, the whole population. And if nothing else, just everyone who's searching. Like, there is enough data present in both those networks that these top phrases that pop in are not just a one-off thing. They're based on millions of collective searches. And it's just so revealing to see that on Facebook, the top 5 things are all positives. They're all kind of some sort of, glorification of a situation. And on Google, you get the what I would say is the real truth. You get people's, concern and people's worries. And look, you also, of course, have to make the argument that, look, no one maybe has a need to Google, my husband is the greatest, or Google, my husband is my best friend, or anything like that. So there is it isn't exactly comparing apples to apples, but it is showing that, the things that people search for on their day-to-day lives in a search capacity, only some of it, if any, aligns with the front that people don't search for but rather present on Facebook. I know this is probably not shocking to anyone, but just having some tangible evidence is really interesting to me, at least. I may quote 1 or 2 more things from this article after this next song. But anyway, I've delayed it enough. Coming up next, as I said, we have DHS with Blowing, the series Uns Edit, because Immortal wanted to hear my favorite DHS track, and, that's the one I think we're going to go with. So, without further ado, DHS, take it away.
musica è una cosa talmente astratta. Che cos'è? È l'espressione del silenzio, la musica. E infatti nell'elettronica in generale è proprio interessante il rapporto, soprattutto nel digitale, che c'è con il silenzio, perché se questa affermazione è vera, il silenzio che si ha con le interfacce digitali è molto più reale rispetto a quello delle macchine analogiche.
Yeah, totally, DHS. I could not agree with you more. And if I had all the recent upgrades into PlanMixPlay, then we probably wouldn't have heard his tirade there at the end. But it's unfortunately a necessary evil, given some of the lacking controllers that I have. People are people are talking a bit about various DJ software pieces on the chat. Mix, among other things, being mentioned with 3X's and Tractor and Serato. Well, maybe no one has mentioned Serato Scratch. I'll be honest and say, and this is, of course, this comes down to the individual, but oh man, this is kind of sad. But if I was looking at buying, so this all ties into local hosters apparently looking at buying a console, or I would say a MIDI controller, a piece of kit that can go together with some DJ software, or maybe not even with that. I'm not really sure what he wants to hook it up to, but he wants to buy a piece of kit and use that. And my view is something that I care a lot about is the quality of the sound when you pitch shift something without changing, or that is to say, you change the tempo, but you want to keep the pitch of the music the same, which is not, let's just say it's easier said than done by far. This is one of, I would say, perhaps the most calculatory, complex things that happens in a piece of software where you try to, on the fly, change the tempo, but keeping the pitch the same. And a lot of patents and secretive stuff go into this. In fact, there aren't many free pieces of software available that do this. There is one or two, but not a lot. And this is an area where the last time I had a look at it, which is, I think, a few months in the past, maybe half a year, Serato had something that they call pitch and time. And this is their apparently new technology that they're pitching. Haha, if you get that little pun there. And they believe so strongly in how good it is that they charge a little bit extra if you want that feature. And it's weird to me because I remember seeing that and thinking, wait a minute, that wasn't always the case. So does that mean you can't change the tempo without changing the pitch in Serato anymore? Have they taken that out, and are they only selling this upgraded version? My current understanding, and again, take this with a grain of salt, is that no, you have the same algorithm and software chewing away through your songs in Serato, even if you don't buy this. But with pitch and time, you get kind of a souped up version of this, and I think is like $10 extra for that plugin. Which is, I'll be honest and say, I think that's ridiculous. I think they should just raise the price of the software itself. But I get this is a matter of wanting to sell something to people who've already bought the original software and don't, purchase anymore. So it's a way of getting a little more cash out of everyone. So yeah, that's a bit silly. And I can see local hoster kind of pitches in here and says something about local hoster says sound processing quality worries me about these consoles that aren't ubiquitous. Huh? You've lost me. I'm not. So my understanding is that the MIDI controllers, as is, don't really change much in the. No, maybe that's not true. The ones that have a built-in sound card probably would change something. Anyway, it's something to look at. But looking at it from a pure software perspective, if you wanted the best kind of tempo change algorithms, I think Serato is still the best. I would certainly try to hear some comparisons and see how you go. But yeah, you got to cough up an extra $10, and I think Serato, because competition has been so fierce, it's under $100, I think, if you want to buy that, which is, worth considering. And certainly Mix is a really great, good, free initial alternative. I remember looking at it, though, and thinking, this has kind of the shine of all the modern stuff, but is far more limited in its design, and not surprisingly so, because look, it's really commercial versus free, and it's hard to kind of keep up with that. There's a good reason why some of the better ones, or why most audio software these days is still proprietary, because there just isn't a drive to make free stuff. Anyway, I can tell I need a glass of water. And in the meantime, I think we should play one more request. Shargo, you also wanted some Radius with the Great Giant Sisters, the Deep Tunnel remix. And I have never heard this particular version before, so that makes me keen to give it a listen. Let's have a listen. Radius with the Great Giant Sisters Deep Tunnel remix, requested by Shargo. Let's take another song straight away, because that's just how we're going to roll for now. And I'll be playing CZ Tunes with Blue Angels 69 title remix, Chili's Sid Mix. Your turn, hey, hun. That was CZ Tunes with Blue Angel 69 title remix, the Chili's Sid mix. And do you know what that song reminds me of? It reminds me of this song, which is Iceman Magic Afternoon, the instrumental version. Iceman Magic Afternoon instrumental, and I just find this is an awesome chill song as well, so I just couldn't help play that when we had played the other one as well. Moving along, one thing that was mentioned in the chat earlier, Immortal said that, of course, the time stretching capabilities is just the very surface that I've scratched in terms of features of the software packages that do enable you to DJ and mix music together, and he is completely right. Yes, it is a very small thing, but the reason I single it out is because when you have a myriad of features available, like, again, what particularly a feature is in either Traktor or Serato can be a bit hard to pin down, but let's just say you have hundreds of them. It helps to at least isolate the ones where they differ significantly enough. And I would certainly say that looking at this time stretching thing is, a valid point of view, depending on how much this matters to you. If you never really intend to time stretch anything, then, that should not be a consideration. Maybe you're more interested in how the layout is or the UI, something like that. But for me personally, I know that time stretching is a very difficult thing, and getting that right, I remember hearing some examples. I kind of wish I had some MP3 files to play, because I remember being incredibly impressed and thinking, holy moly, they have reached a new level of capabilities here. It can really slow things down, I think, to like 20% of the original song. And yes, of course, fidelity is lost. You can't just recreate this data that was once there. But it was very impressive what the thing could do, at least in the demos that I saw. I've never used it live, so, I take all of this with a grain of salt as well. All right, while I was scrolling through the songs, trying to figure out what I should put on next, I came across Macke. And Macke, well, we haven't played a song from him for a bit, so I thought, why don't we play his Hell on Earth Spells Game Over. Take it away, Macke.
I can still hear my mother yell,
"Son, time for bed!"
And I'd put my pajamas on, brush my teeth, and go to bed. But then I'd hear something in the dark. I would hear my computer talking to me. It would say, "Come on, dude, just one more mission, just one more level." And I just had to get up and do what I must.
Hell on Earth spells game over. And now it's difficult. Now I'm like, what should I pick next? Because there is there's one request in the pipeline, but I'm not sure I'm feeling that one. And as you can tell, I've also kind of lacking a script, run a bit dry of what exactly to say here as we enter into the sort of kind of last third of the show. I think I'm going to put on a Last Ninja remix, and just to be a little bit different, we'll do the TMX arrangement. This is TMX with Last Ninja 2, the Mansion remastered Type 4. not dead air at all. TMX with Last Ninja 2, The Mansion Remastered Type 4. Yeah, and as Immortal shows here, or talks about in the chat, that the show schedule seems a little thin the past week, and it lacks Go Hank's show, and that's for sure. I'm certainly also missing Go Hank's shows. So there's a lot of external pressure to do a show, I would say. And look, you got to give people time. It's a very internal decision. So while pleased to have someone come back and do a show are generally well received, they can also kind of just add unwanted pressure and just make it even more unlikely to happen in a way. So I would advise anyone who is keen on seeing Go Hanks do another show, just basically say, I really enjoyed the shows you did, and when you decide to do another show, I'm all there. Like, can't wait. And I would say I speak from limited experience, but I know myself that any sort of, even just like, hey, you should do a show, can in some ways just add unwanted guilt onto an already guilt-ridden mind about when to do it and what to do and how much time you have. So I would say go Hanks, take your time, and when you're ready, we'll be here. In the meantime, take it away, DJ Skits, with Super Huey, the Chopper Mix. DJ skits with Super Huey, the Chopper mix. Really good stuff, really good stuff. As I'm wont to do, I'm going to tell you exactly what's coming up next, and this is Athena drifting mix. But before that, to add on to things, people are Greyman and Immortal specifically are kind enough to let me know that, of course, I should only do any shows, or give me sentiments that they express their sentiment that they only want me to do a show if I'm feeling able and willing to do so, and I appreciate that, and I can respond loudly and clearly and say I personally don't suffer too much from, I would say, show pressure. Like, sure, I know that it's something I do my best to keep going, but if I were to suddenly disappear for a few weeks or a month or two, I wouldn't feel too bad about it. But as Immortal points out, getting back into doing a show after you've been away for a while can be a bit of a challenge. And I know that Boz as well has kind of spoken about an up and a down period and kind of had times where he felt more compelled to do something and less compelled to do something. And I'll be honest and say, I think for me, such a major part of it, and I've probably said this before, but I can't see the harm in expressing it again, a massive part of the show for me is absolutely using the instrument that I'm building. That is a big motivating factor. And of course, it doesn't really register on the other end as such, because you just hear the audio output, and currently, again, things are very basic. But there's such a compelling part in doing the show with the program, because it lets me test it, it lets me see if I think things are working the way they should. The unfortunate side is also, of course, the more I use it myself, the more I'm prone to getting used to all its weird quirks, and I know absolutely for certain that it is far from ready in terms of prime time to be used by anyone but me, because it has a lot of odd quirks in it. And I also appreciate that Greyman expresses his sentiment saying that the project is more important. And yeah, to a degree, but at the same time, it's also one of those classic things of like, what good is music if no one's there to hear it? What good is poetry if no one's there to read it? And in the same way, what good is this musical instrument if no one's using it? So yes, it's more important, but using it in conjunction with my show, which I've been doing now for nigh on a year or two, it's an important cornerstone of everything. So one without the other doesn't make a lot of sense. And as you can see, I could dedicate these hours to development instead of doing the show. Arguably, though, it wouldn't be the most clean and efficient development, because, the shows that I do here on the other side of the planet for most of you is quite late. So when the clock strikes 8, I would say there are days where I'm super juiced up and ready to go and ready to solve a lot of problems and work through issues. But at the same time, generally at night is not my best development time. I would say I have more focus and more mental resources available during the day. All right, let's take another song. This time I've picked one that Phil at some point chose. Phil, the epic co-host from the past. It is Athena drifting mix with DJ Space. Athena with Drifting Mix DJ Space. And SceneCat just joins us on the chat as I say this. And I intended to address a question that Immortal asked, which was whether or not there is any co-hosting in the pipeline. And also Shargo gives a wave to Phil, who most likely isn't listening in, but who knows, might catch this on the download, although I'll be honest and say Phil was never much of a C64 guy, so he was very helpful and interested and very compliant in hosting the show with me, or rather co-hosting it, which I thought was awesome, but his own motivation to kind of delve deeper into C64 remixes was somewhat limited, so do not expect him to be trolling around in the background, unfortunately. Anyway, Immortal asked if there was any co-hosting in the pipeline, and I'll say yes, it is something that I've considered at times, and something that I'm certainly interested in doing something about. First of all, the right person has to be found, which is something I give quite a bit of thought to. And the second thing is also that I actually currently don't have more than one microphone, so the Yeti that I'm using, which I would say is a great microphone, does support kind of dual recording. It has a mode where two people can talk into the microphone each from their own side, but I'm reluctant to approach it this way because it would basically mean almost looking into the eyes of whoever it is you are doing the show with, which I think is a bit physically awkward. And yeah, it's also just kind of the space that you need to share and where the microphone would have to be. And right now, I use the microphone while looking directly at PlanMixPlay and try to coordinate the show that way. And it would be a bit odd to have to do that. So I'd have to get another microphone. And if you recall, there was a second microphone back when I did the show with Phil. And I've basically given it to him as a thank you, and also because I was cutting down on things that I wanted to bring home with me from Japan. And there's also a third aspect to all of this in general, and I would say this does feed a bit into my reluctance, but more because I want to set up a formal procedure or a process. And so what I'm going to mention here is something I personally haven't been bitten by or tried or experienced, but I think it's healthy to have certain standards and expect certain things, and the show as is very how should I say, it's very informal. Like I don't have a lot of strict procedures. I tend to try and write a script, but sometimes I don't. I kind of have segments come and go. I had that, DJ, I can't even remember what the DJ was, DJ Woozle or DJ something, and I, picked on people's DJs bias, and kind of made fun of that. But that segment has been put on hiatus for now. So there isn't, the only structure really as of currently is that there's visual output, there's audio output, and it happens once a week. And the reason I mention these formal procedures is because, that's right, Immortal mentions it. DJ Snorkel, of course. The reason I'm mentioning this is because it's great if you do a hosting session with a DJ where things go well and everything clicks and you are both on the same page and you want things to continue and everything is honky-dory. It's not so easy if things don't necessarily match up. And look, not everyone who thinks they are a great show host are. And that doesn't necessarily mean that they shouldn't host a show. It's just, of course, more that things have to adhere to a standard that I set. And I'm definitely more of a guy, I'm more in the corner of, I would rather, unfortunately, risk making someone upset and making their feelings hurt and say, hey, let's not do this again. Rather than just keeping the show going and appeasing both parties and kind of ignoring the tough choice. And this is something that, is something I don't have to contend with at all, as long as it's just me hosting the show. Whereas if I were to involve someone, of course, it's one of those things where I can invite people on a show-by-show basis, but it would kind of be probably best to have a more or less permanent fixture in a way. And then that becomes a bit more tricky. So I think I might be even tempted to say that once, if and when I start doing this again, I may introduce a more formal procedure and say, look, let's have a test show or two, or let's even have a small interview, something like that. Just because, I like process, I like structure, and it also makes it a bit easier if, we figure out, hey, this isn't quite working for whatever reason. But it isn't something that that I've moved with. There are other priorities, so it's something that's coming down the pipeline. But right now, there are other much more important things that I'm working through. But speaking of Phil, who is probably not listening in, but could be, this is another song that he picked back in the day, and for some reason the title is first and the artist is second. It is Let's Go with Berserk.
Let's go! Let's go!
Berserk with Let's Go. And that's a damn good tune, even if I do say so myself. Also, I want to thank Immortal and Shargo, who've continued to put a few requests in the Requestatron just to keep me a little less lonely, I suppose. And I want to emphasize this. Sometimes it depends a bit on how I'm feeling. If I've generally run out of requests from varied listeners, I just kind of sometimes run the show by picking whatever I want on my own. Don't take any offense to that. It's more a matter of if it's a person who hasn't requested before, I want to, of course, directly reward that and say, hey, thanks for taking the time to request something. I'll do my best to play your song. And if it's someone who requests multiple times, sometimes I will play that because, look, let's face it, this show just isn't popular enough to have countless unique requests. But on the other hand, sometimes I'll decide that, I'll just rather play some tunes that I pick. And that's just the way this show goes. But just as it so happens, a new contender has come along. A new challenger has appeared. In the form of Sus64738, and this individual wanted an Amiga remix, which I'm keen to play because I haven't heard this. This is from Dax, who's done a remix of the Pinball Dreams beatbox game, and I actually really liked the soundtrack to that, even though it's not very melodic. I remember it just being like a series of breaks and beats, so I'm kind of curious how Dax has strung that all together. And before I play it, I also want to highlight, of course, I realize that there is no definitive assurance that anyone who requests something under a new name on the website isn't the same person. But I'll ask anyone who is a frequent listener, and even the ones who aren't, please refrain from using an alias or something just to get me to play a different request, because then you're kind of subverting my wishes. And hey, if you want to do that, that's fine. Just know that that's not really the point here. But I'm sure you're clever enough to figure that out on your own. I'd say let's just give this a run. This is Dax with Pinball Dreams Beatbox in-game remix. Dax with Pinball Dreams Beatbox in-game remix. And yeah, I think that's a solid version. Yeah, my honest opinion is that I'm not super enthused. I guess it's because I think the soundtracks in general don't translate that well, because look, let's be honest, the music in these games, as awesome as the pinball games were basically, they were kind of broken up all the time. So you'd play the game, or the song would play, and then whenever you hit a certain feature on the pinball board, a kind of a break would come in. And the song that you heard, I would say the main theme of any pinball table in either Pinball Dreams or Illusions or Fantasies was definitely composed with this thought in mind that, hey, very often this song will be broken off and you'll get a different part of the song, or rather you'll repeat the first part of the song. So it would basically play the first few notes, then it would be interrupted, and then it would reset right back to playing the first few notes again. And with this in mind, I think the soundtrack of all of the games worked incredibly well, whereas when it's strung together into one long continuous song, it leaves a little to be desired. And I can't, I'm not a good composer or a good arranger, so I can't really speak as to whether or not there is a better way, but I can say that the version that Dax put together was a little, if that's the best that's possible to do with this material, then I think I'm compelled to prefer a few other tracks, as it were. I think we should take one more song, and then I'll be wrapping up the show for tonight. But I've picked out another defunct tune. This time it's Driven 21 Tiny Remix, and if I'm not mistaken, would actually be a great wind down tune. But I thought, let's just throw in one more for old time's sake. This is Defunk with Driven 21. Oh wait, before I do play that, let me of course say thank you very much to Sis64738 for requesting Dax's remix of the Pinball Dreams track. And now some Defunk with Driven 21.
Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part. Ernest Hemingway once wrote, "The world is a fine place and worth fighting for." I agree with the second part.
Indeed, Morgan Freeman agrees with the second part, which is apparently that it's worth fighting for, but not a fine place. In case every single one of you hadn't already realized that a bazillion times over. And thus, my friends, it is with a sad heart that I conclude tonight airing/broadcast, but there will be more in the future. Look forward to next week. I hope to announce a show much earlier this time because things are not as up in the air. There are other upcoming shows. In fact, Chrome is beginning to act up again. I swear it's simply too random to not have something to do with PlanMixPlay. I don't know what it could be because I'm surprised as to why Chrome would have an issue with what PlanMixPlay does, even though PlanMixPlay does do a few web requests every now and then to update the the stream title and a few other things. But for some reason now when I open a new tab in Chrome and I click on one of the links that I already have or something else, it just kind of defaults to the main Google search page and then nothing else. And I'm clueless as to what that means. In fact, I can type something in the search bar and nothing happens. Nothing shows up at all. Like that, I don't get what it is. And this is like a continuing pattern I've been seeing on and off again with recent versions of Chrome and PlanMixPlay. So yeah, I'm confused. But given that the show is almost at its end, no biggie. And yes, thank you everyone for hanging out with me. I had a great time. I hope you did as well. I'm choosing to go out on one of these slow songs that I rarely play, which is Mandrian, something like that, with Kjell Norbo Selecta. And hopefully you will be tuning in again for the next show. I'm sure Boz will do something in the middle of the week with Kate, and there will be a few others. But in the meantime, please enjoy this last song, and I'll see you guys soon.
So far, are these visual things the only effects you find?
No.
What other effects?
It's all to do with colour. It's all to do with round, with shape. Everything's colour. Everything there is. I can't use colour.